Alright, so first things first, we're going to want to go to the, well, actually, first of all, when you get to the main menu screen, right, a lot of people go to the single player editor right here. This is actually, yeah, you could use that editor to edit missions for multiplayer, but what I like to do is I like to use the multiplayer editor. That way, we can playtest our multiplayer missions in real time without having to backtrack or go back and forth. And if we forgot something, oh my god, you gotta load it again over and over again. So here we're gonna go multiplayer, server browser, host server, and it doesn't matter if you set it to LAN. Actually, yeah, set it to LAN because we don't want anybody joining. And just host server. They literally don't touch anything. Does not matter what the name of the server is or anything like that. We're just using this to edit. So now our computer is going to set up a local server, and we're going to select a map. So now we're in the mission editor, or multiplayer mission editor. So virtual reality. For this tutorial, I'll just be using VR since it's nice and flat. Yeah, so we're going to go new 3D editor. And this is going to spawn up a blank template for us to use in multiplayer. I'll show you what that means in a second. Alright, so we're in. This is our blank map. Obviously, when you're making a mission, you want to have an idea of what you want your mission to be centered around. For here, our blank map, I'm just showing you guys how to do this. Set up a Zeus template, first of all. So, a couple things you want to do before you start making a mission. One, I recommend downloading the map or add-on called 3D Editor. That's really, really good for, editing things in the Eden editor in terms of like user interface, things like that. You could use 3D editor. It helps a lot. I'll show you how and why. And there's a lot of features I'm not going to cover, but it's very helpful, trust me. Or 3D enhanced. Sorry, yeah, that's what it's called. 3D enhanced, my bad. Okay, so first things first, we want to get our Zeus set up. So I'm going to be linking you guys a bit of a few compositions that I have that I use a lot. In the description below, they're going to be on Dropbox. I'll give you a little description what they are. But first things first, we want to get our Zeus and our players actual slots in the mission itself. That way they can actually play it. You want a playable mission, you don't want an unplayable one. So we're going to spawn our guys here. Spawn players new composition. So this is going to spawn in our guys. First things first, they shouldn't be floating like that. So we're gonna fix that in a second. But in order to fix that, we need to make sure what type of terrain editing or terrain level we are at. So edit up here at the top left, vertical mode. We want to set our vertical mode to above terrain level. Now there's two types of terrain levels. There's above sea level, above terrain level. Above sea level is always relative to the map's sea level. So each map has a different sea level, but obviously that's considered 0 or absolute 0 if you want to be more specific. But above sea level is useful for spawning in compositions that people have made in above sea level terrain mode. So you obviously kind of play around with the two a lot. We'll get into more detail about that, but for right now we're going to use above terrain level. So what above terrain level does is it doesn't let your objects go below ground level. It sets them relative to the terrain. So if we drag all our guys down, now they're flush against the bottom of the map. This only applies for terrain. This does not apply for objects. So say I was to bring my guys over here, now they're flush against the terrain, which is a slope. And this can work for hills, this can work for anything. You don't want your guys floating because that they could die or get hurt before the mission even starts. So we're just going to have them flush against the ground here. Move them up here because it's flat. So I've got a lot of synced things here, but actually that was by mistake. This composition got a little messed up because I packed it up to put it on Dropbox, so we're going to actually delete all these syncs. The only synced stuff should be between the players themselves, like the player slots here. We don't want any synced modules or anything like that. Also, we want to move our modules outside this trigger. I'll explain what this trigger, I'll explain everything in this tutorial, but we're just taking it one step at a time. Obviously, that's how you get things done. If you have a development mindset, you should be taking things one step at a time. So let me just get rid of all these sync stuff. Nothing should be synced. All right. Cool. Okay. So in this tutorial, we're going to be covering two types of respawn systems that I like to use and I think are the most effective ways at creating a mission. Each has its own sets of pros and cons, and each are used for different aspects of a mission or different types of mission. If you want to, if you want a cinematic experience or if you want a more like Zeus-friendly mission, we'll cover them. So the first type of respawn system is going to be your regenerative respawn system. This is what I like to call it because you can actually control where people can respawn in real time in Zeus. If you have a progressive mission that if it's like a Rush from Battlefield 3 and you like go and you take a objective and you want people to respawn at that objective now, or if you want people to respawn in different places and you want to select where they're doing in real time, you can do that. If you want to set up mobile respawns, things like that, you could do that using regenerative. So that's the pro side of it. The only con is using regenerative. You can't have like a cinematic start to the mission. Wherever the respawn is, or wherever a respawn is where people have to go at the beginning of the mission. Now this is bad if you want like, a cinematic experience at the start of your mission, but we'll cover that. We'll get into it. Okay, so to set up your regenerative respawn system initially, we have to set our game type. Well, you don't have to set this, but I like to set it because I like things to be correct. But for this is obviously Zeus. This could be whatever you like, but I like to set to Zeus because I do a lot of Zeus missions. Cool, so now as it is, your mission's broken. Don't you love Arma? So, in order to get your mission working, specifically for a regenerative respawn system, you're going to want to set your respawn on set respawn to respawn on custom position. Just ignore what it tells you. Just do what I'm saying. So you get a lot of like checkboxes here and things like that. The only two you need to worry about are select respawn position and show respawn counter. So we're going to select our respawn position. This is what our regenerative system is selecting respawn position. Cool. Awesome. Also, remember to disable AI, so uncheck that. This is always by default checked. You don't want that because you don't want AI taking up your player slots or running around in them just for, just for the good of humanity. Just uncheck that. Alright, so now, as it is, our mission is still broken. And that's because we don't have a respawn delay set. So you need at least a respawn delay of at least 1 second. Otherwise, your regenerative respawn system will not work. So we're just going to click the arrow here, set this to 5. Vehicle respawn delay doesn't matter, but I like these to be the same thing. I don't know why, I just usually click both, but you don't have to set the vehicle respawn delay. Just respawn delay. Set it. I like to just set it to 5 seconds. It's whatever. So yeah, so now we're set up for regenerative respawn. So when you actually get into the mission, using this composition, there's a lot of stuff here that isn't going to be used for the regenerative respawn system. One of those is this other trigger. We'll get into what this does later on, but this is if you're using a custom composition that I'm going to be providing you guys, and if you're using Optray, and more specifically if you're making missions for the 105th. But we'll cover that later. For now, we're just looking at regenerative respawn system and a basic Zeus template. So this trigger that the guys are in, we're going to move that away because we're not... Shit, there's sinks. We're going to move that away because we're not actually using that right now. We're just looking at this. So, one, we need Zeuses. So you need to actually cordon off a slot or two to use as a Zeus. So now I've provided this custom comp for you guys to obviously use, but for starters, we're going to actually start from scratch here, and I'll show you what everything means. So when you first get into a mission, you're obviously going to have nothing around you. You see, you don't see anything. and you're going to want to put down, people to use. So for here, we're going to use the UNSC because why not? Desert Marines, I guess. Officer, cool. So this is going to be our Zeus. So the first person that you place down should be your Zeus slot. So we're going to go into his attributes. And by default, the first thing that you place down is going to be the player, and it's going to be playable. So playable means that a person can slot in as this, or into this slot, basically. It's another slot that a person can play as. What player means is this is the primary slot. So this is the slot that will be taken up when the first person joins the mission in the lobby. So just for convenience sake, we're going to set the Zeus to playable, and we're going to set them to player, so we're going to leave these both checked. Now we want to know which slot is our Zeus slot. So our role description, we're just going to type in Zeus here. No, Zeus. Variable name, Zeus. So role description and variable name have different, roles. So yeah, they have different functions. So role description, that's just telling you what slot this is. So this is the Zeus slot. So variable name is defining what scripts will be interacting with this slot. So obviously we want this slot to be able to use Zeus, so we're going to set our variable name to Zeus. This is case sensitive. Oh, no, sorry, it's not case sensitive. So you could set this to Zeus, or you could set it to capital Z Zeus, whatever you want, but I like to keep it lowercase just to, uniquely identify it. But variable name, Zeus. Cool. So now we have our Zeus slot, but we still won't be able to access Zeus. So we have to go into Systems here on the right. You have all your modules for editor. We're going to go all the way down to Zeus. Game Master. Place down a Game Master slot. Inside of its attributes, owner, name, default add-ons, force interface, none of that matters. The only thing that matters is owner. So we're going to set this to Zeus. The same variable name we're using for our slot. So make sure that variable name up here and the owner, they match perfectly. It isn't case sensitive, but I recommend you make sure that they're the same because, like I said, people always mess up stuff, or stuff could happen. So just make sure they're the same. That being said, do not sync this to whatever you want to use. I know it says you can, but in my experience, it's just, I don't know. This is just the tried and true method. Just make sure you set the variable names to the same thing. Also, if you're going to do multiple Zeuses, so let's just copy this guy. See, now he's going to be Zeus 2, and then we're going to set his role description to co-Zeus. So say you wanted 2 Zeuses in a mission. Playable, don't set him to player, because remember, you can only have one slot that is your primary slot. So we're going to leave that blank, but he's going to be playable. So now we have our second Zeus here. Another Game Master module. One Game Master module per Zeus slot that you want. So we're going to have our other, oh shit, we're going to have our other variable name for the co-Zeus in this other owner slot here. So now, two Game Master modules, 2 Zeus slots. Done. Alright, now we want our actual players to be in the mission. So, I'm just going to get some basic auto riflemen here. Doesn't matter, you could choose whatever AI you choose to place down is going to be the default loadout that people start out with when they join your mission. You can edit this by going right-clicking, and you can edit their loadout via one of the arsenals. You can edit that's how you edit their default loadout when they start the mission, but for now we're not going to worry about that. So obviously you want this to be a player slot, so you're going to set this check playable. Role description. For me, I like to use operator because it's very generic. More specifically, I'm going to be making this mission for the 105th, so it's going to be 105th operator, or it could be 105th medic, or 105th operator medic, or 105th operator special forces, whatever you want to name it. This is your mission, obviously your template. Variable name, so this is going to be default soldier number 762, so we're not actually going to put a variable name because they don't matter. Don't quote me on that. But so yeah, now we've got one of our operators here. We're just going to copy and paste that guy because that's how many player slots we want. Okay, so however many players you want to be able to play in your mission at once, That's how many slots you should place. I do not recommend doing this, by the way. You want to count up how many slots you have. But for the sake of this tutorial, we're just going to put a bunch of them. Awesome. Now, what we want to do is, by default, they're all in their own groups. So they all have their own call sign, 2-1, 2-2, 2-3, 2-4. What that looks like, so let's play the scenario. This is why we use the multiplayer editors, so that we can view what our mission will look like in real time. So let's play. And this is what it looks like. And that doesn't look very good, because you've got everything sectioned off in its own category. I don't know. I just don't like the look of that. So we're going to go back. We're going to grab all the people we want in the same category. We're going to hold Control and left click and drag to the first slot that you place down, like that. And now when we go into the scenario and we look, everything's nice and flush. Looks nice, looks professional. Looks like you're ready to play some Arma, right? Notice how the Zeus and co-Zeus are in different categories. Let's fix that. Once again, I'm going to add them to the same group. Make sure you're dragging to the first slot that was placed. Shit, did that work? No, that didn't work. Okay. Yep, there we go. Now they're in the same category. You can tell because now if you select this, it selects both of them. Now, when we go, Zeus, co-Zeus are in their own nice category. Everyone else is, subhuman. Just kidding. In their own slot. So let's go back. And yeah, that is how you set up your player slots. That's how you set up your Zeus. So now this would be, excluding these triggers and stuff, this would be a basic Zeus setup. So now you have your, forgot one thing. Most importantly, this would not work as is. So if your mission was just this that you see on the screen, it would not work, because we're using, if you recall, we set up for a regenerative respawn system. You need a respawn. So as of now, nobody would be able to spawn in. So we need to go to modules, under systems, multiplayer, respawn position. Now this respawn position, make sure you place it where you want people to respawn to or start out initially. That's one of the, I would call it a con of the regenerative respawn system, is you have to have an initial respawn point, and that cannot change. So this is your initial respawn position. The name, I like to set the name of it to wherever you're spawning at. So say it's a FOB, a town, something, set it to the name of that town or the name of that FOB. We're going to call this FOB Alpha because we're basic. Yeah, and if you're doing multiple factions, you can rinse and repeat this method over and over again for Red 4, Independent, etc. throughout your mission. Just make sure you set the side to the correct side. Everything else does not matter for the initial respawn position. Well, actually it does matter, just don't change it. Anything. Just make sure you change the side and the name. Boom, done. Now, this is set up for your regenerative respawn system, basic Zeus template with a co-Zeus. And you got your player slots. So, we're not going to go into Zeusing in this tutorial, but this is how you would set that up. Now, our other type of respawn will be your non-regenerative respawn system. So as opposed to the regenerative, the non-regenerative is good for having a cinematic opening to a mission. What does that mean? It means that at the start of the mission, people aren't going to be selecting where they spawn. They're going to be spawning wherever you place their slots, or in whatever vehicles the slots are placed in initially, and they're going to be going into the mission as is. Now there's that would be the pro of this respawn method. The cons would be, in Zeus, you can't add more respawn positions, so you can't have like a progressive mission where they keep spawning to different places. They always have to go back to the same respawn position that you've set at in the mission editor. So you cannot move their respawn position or add more, if that makes sense. Another con to this would be, it's a bit more like, it makes your mission a bit more like, yes, it is cinematic, but like I said, it's you can't do much with it after the fact. So you can't change respawn positions. You can't change the respawn position that you set initially. So you better make sure that your mission is set up correctly the way you want it the first time. That being said, I like to prefer this method because I like my missions to be a bit more cinematic, and because I do mostly one life ops that are very serious, and this just helps with that mentality because it gives value to a person's life rather than having them spawn in, spawn in, spawn in. If you die, you go back all the way to the Corvette or wherever your FOB is, and that's that. Unless, yeah, we'll get into that later. But to do this, first of all, you cannot use the respawn position module for this, so we're going to get rid of that. We're going to go into attributes, multiplayer. So right now we're set up for regenerative. Literally the way to change it to non-regenerative is to uncheck select respawn position, because people are not doing that in this method. That's it. So you uncheck that. Make sure you have a respawn delay if you're doing this for your first time. Game type, does not matter. Make sure you uncheck enable AI. Like I said before, you don't want AI running around in your player slots. Make sure that's unchecked. Don't touch anything else. Done. All right, now we have regenerative system, or non-regenerative system set up. However, this does not work right now. Reason for that being there are no respawns set. How do you set a respawn? All right. So, you saw I just deleted that marker. That was from the composition. I didn't delete it before. But the way to set a respawn in the non-regenerative system is to use markers on the map. Now, a good way to do this is position your camera where you want your respawn to be and where you want it to be facing. So say I want it to be facing, that way. I'm going to and then look straight down. So when I look down, my camera, I see where I want it to be, so I'll adjust my camera accordingly. Say I want it to be right on this, right on this thing right here. Now I'm going to go into the map, look at where my camera is, and put a marker on it. So here I'm going to put this dot. I'm going to move it right onto my camera. Done. And then I'm going to face it towards where the camera's pointing. However, this isn't the end of it. So obviously, your variable name has to be the respawn, so that you have to set the respawn via the variable name. So since we're blue 4, we're going to do respawn_west. This is part of Bohemia's default syntax they use to, tell people where to spawn. You could also do respawn, so this is just generic. This will just apply to every faction, but obviously if you have a multi-faction mission, you don't want that, so we're going to do specifically respawn_west. That'll tell every blue 4 player, hey, you're spawning here, you can't change it. Okay, cool. Now that that's done, we're going to move our camera, middle click or middle mouse button to move your camera around the map if you didn't know that. And now this marker is going to be viewable in the mission. So if you want, you could change the alpha percentage down to 0, and people won't be able to see it. However, you won't be able to edit it unless you go on the left here and look at the entities and actually, edit where it is. And you can select it here, set it back to viewable, move it to wherever you like it to be, and then make it invisible again. Cool. Now that that's done, that's our non-regenerative system. However, our players are still set up for the regenerative system. So they're just all kind of ragtag running around, they're just in the open here. So to take advantage fully of this system, obviously, say you had a mission, say you had they had an objective, and they're moving in on like a car or something. So you would actually get so not the Zeus slots, because obviously you're going to be Zeusing in those, but the rest of them, say you wanted them to be in one big convoy at the beginning of the op, and you wanted that convoy, you wanted that convoy to be rolling down a road or something. So you would get their slots, if I can get this correctly, and actually put them, where you want them to be at the start of the mission. So say you want them all in this car to be like a Skyrim opening or something, then you can obviously make that so with this system. This is what I enjoy. You can play around with this all you want. You could do some real cool stuff. You could put them in airplanes, and like the airplanes are flying in, they're paradropping at the beginning of the mission. Stuff like that. Real cool. Awesome stuff. Like I said, it only works for the beginning of the mission. So once they die, they respawn back at that respawn point that you set up, etc., etc. So we're just going to do this real quick. So this is just showing you what you could do with it. So now these people are going to be, when these players spawn in, they're going to be in these cars. You know, if the cars get blown up, they're still going to be around the car or around the wreck or whatever. So make sure you when you're playing around with this, you know what you're doing. You know, you test it a lot, you play test the mission, because this can go real south real quick if you don't set the mission up correctly. Now, if say one player spawns in and the rest aren't spawned in, they're just not going to appear. They're just going to be non-existent until that player loads in, and then they're just going to suddenly appear in the mission next to that person or whatever. So that's how that works. All right, so that's the non-regenerative system. I didn't mean to do that. So yeah, that's how those are the two basic respawn systems. That's how to set up a basic Zeus template for any map. This doesn't have to be VR. Let's get into the specifics of the 105th stuff. So if you're not part of the 105th, or you know, you may not know what we're talking about here if you don't do Optra Halo stuff in Arma, but this will be how to set up a Corvette template for, you know, a mission where your Corvette's in space. So we're actually going to go to a different map, show you guys how to do that. Like I said, if you're not part of the 105th, I'll put a link to our Discord down below in the description, but this is kind of like a unit-specific tutorial end here, but the rest of the stuff before this point was universal. I'm not saying that the rest of it isn't going to be universal, but I'm definitely going to be showing, you know, my guys how to do this. So we're going to go to a different map. Let's just do, what's a good map? I've played all these maps so much I don't know which one's good anymore. BT7's cool. So this is if you want to set up a Corvette, or if you want to set up a FOB mission. Personally, I don't like FOB missions. I just like Corvette templates. So I'll show you how to do the Corvette system. To set up an FOB mission, you would just do what I did before. Select a respawn system that you like, and then put like a Zeus template in the FOB or whatever and set a respawn point on it. It's really simple, self-explanatory. Yeah, so this is how to do a Corvette though. So we've got our map. We've got to find a position on the map with flat terrain. So we're going to look on the map here, look for flat terrain. Usually it's in the ocean. I like to put the Corvette over the oceans because I could see the terrain lines in the ocean, sort of, if the map's good. But we're going to find a place in the ocean here to put the Corvette template. So first things first, we're going to go into Edit, Vertical Mode, make sure we're above sea level. That way, you know, we're using that common plane underneath the map to reference all of our structures onto. It also is helpful because the compositions are referenced to sea level as well. So yeah. So we're going to find a flat place. So we need to find a flat place because of our vehicle spawner. Our vehicle spawner on the Corvette is relative to terrain level, not sea level. However, if the terrain beneath the vehicle spawner is curved or you know, it's rocky or whatever, the vehicle is going to spawn askew and it's going to blow up in the hangar. We don't want that, so that's why we're finding a flat place. So if you're not a second lieutenant in the Army, you'll know how to read terrain lines. I'm going to find, so right here will be a flat, you know, so right around here in that little box there would be a flat place on the thing. Also, like this curve here would be nice. We're going to go in the corner here though. Looks like that looks pretty flat, like this entire box. So we're going to get our composition, and we're going to place it down right here. Now make sure that this or these two like markers are over the flat place. Everything else doesn't matter, but make sure that this is over where you want it to be flat. So obviously this is the flattest or the deepest part where it's probably the flattest part of the terrain here, so that's why I put that right there. But make sure that this is where it's flat. We'll get into that later, but for now we're going to go to the Corvette. Let me show you what it looks like. So this is the Corvette. We're 4,000 meters up. Should be. Let me check. Yeah, we're about 4,000 meters up in the sky. This is how the composition is. If you want to set it lower, go for it, but this is the maximum height you can set vehicles, or you can place vehicles at before they start to break, their flight models to be exact. So at least for the Pelicans and whatnot. So that's why we chose this height, is because we want the Corvette to be as high as possible without breaking things. This is where it is. The way we determined that was just through trial and error, referencing different heights of the map. Obviously, if we go down, we can see that if we go underneath the ocean, we can't even see anything. So that's why we use the map to look at terrain lines. All right, so we're going to go to map again. So in the description below, there's a Corvette template that you would use. There's also this player's new template. So this is the template that we use to start off every new mission that we want to use a template on. So we're still in above sea level, and we want to use that for above the ocean. So we're going to place down this composition on the ocean surface here. So let's go down here, and here we are. So here's our guys. They're above the water, basically, over the ocean. So let me get rid of, sorry, I know that there's all these synced stuff. Let's get rid of that. That's not supposed to be synced there. Let me just get rid of all these. That was just some error that happened when I zipped up the composition. I'll be fixing that. So the version that you download in the comments, or yeah, in the description, does not have these random synced things. But all right, we've got our composition here. So now this is set up for both non-regenerative and regenerative systems simultaneously. So you can use either or. I'm actually going to move these modules outside of the trigger. That way they don't get caught and teleported into the Corvette, and then you have random collidable entities just invisible in the Corvette that you run into. Don't want that. So first things first, we're going to leave everything the same. This should be a common template across the unit. We have our 2 Zeus slots, we have our Game Master setup, we have our satellite entity, which is the starting point for our satellite. MCC writes headless module or headless client slots for headless clients. We have our worthless headless client setup module. That's just a utility to help with headless client offloading to server offloading to headless client compatibility. Okay, so we have a respawn position. Remember I told you that if you use the non-regenerative system, you don't use the module? Well, you can leave the module on the map and it just won't do anything. Because the non-regenerative system only uses markers, specifically the respawn west, respawn east variable name in the marker, then you could just leave this here, it won't matter. Like I said, this is set up for both non-regenerative and regenerative systems. So on the Corvette, there is there's a couple grass cutters, there's a couple references you need to use. All the tools are laid out there automatically. This is as streamlined as possible, so just bear with me on it, alright? So this is where we're going to spawn in on the Corvette initially. Personally, I like to use the non-regenerative system. If you want to use the regenerative system, I'll show you how to do that using this template, okay? But if you want to play around with stuff, go ahead, edit it. So let's start with the regenerative system first. So regenerative system, like I said, it uses these modules. So with the regenerative system, I've included a cool little like cryo bay area. You've got an individual respawn system set up with all of these cryopods. So if you use the regenerative system, people can load into the cryopods. It's pretty cinematic. I like it. If you use the non-regenerative system, this does not work. Doesn't affect anything. They will just not work. So don't worry about that if you're using the non-version. But anyways, we're using the regenerative system, so let me show you how to do that. We're going to take the height of this pad here, which is going to be our initial spawn in the Corvette. So we're going to grab its height, which will be this Z value here. Copy that, Control C. Go back on the map. Now this big trigger here is what people will be spawning into, not only for their player slot, but also for their first respawn position, or the respawn position that's for the ship. So we're going to name this after the ship. 2 for flinching, lover, great ship. This is for the regenerative system at least. This is where people would spawn, and then they would be automatically teleported to the Corvette via this trigger. So they probably won't see the C at all. They'll just immediately spawn in on the Corvette. But I'm just showing you how that works exactly. So we've taken the reference height from the pad on the Corvette. We're going to go into the trigger here, and we're going to set that or paste it into this value here. So this trigger is a repeatable trigger that takes the people in it and teleports them using this script here. If you want to copy that, take it for whatever you want, go for it. If you know scripting. If not, this is what you do. Take the height, paste it here. These two variables are the variables you're teleporting to. So make sure those are the correct ones. We're going to pad. So these are correct. These are pad and pad. Awesome. Okay. Now if you're using the regenerative system, there is one thing you have to do. You have to delete this marker. So deleting this marker, because this is for the non-regenerative system, if you don't do it, people will be able to spawn here as well. You don't want that because that's a respawn room. I'll cover that when we go over the non-regenerative system, but if you're using the regenerative, delete that. Don't worry about that trigger. Now, when people spawn in, let me show you actually. When people spawn in, they're going to be immediately teleported. Oh shit, hold on. One thing we forgot to cover, or I forgot to do for this mission, sorry, is we need to set up our multiplayer tab. So remember, we're using regenerative. I like to set the game type. Disable AI. Respawn on custom position. Select respawn position because we're using regenerative. Set a respawn delay. Done. Alright, now we're going to save this baby and we're going to play it. Another reason why we use the multiplayer editor. So we're going to load it in our Zeus slot and we're going to play the mission. Now remember, when you're using regenerative, you're able to select the respawn position and you're going to see all those selections right now. However, if you have, like I said, that other marker for the non-regenerative system or floating around, you're going to see that as well. So we want to make things as professional as possible, at least I like to, and eliminate any external variables or things that are like, oh, I forgot that, but whatever, I'll leave it in the mission. No, I don't like to do that. I like to have things perfect, or close to perfect at least. So here we go. We can see all the cryopods. We can see our respawn that we put there. So we're actually going to scroll down. We're going to select that respawn position, UNSC2 for flinching, and it's going to teleport us to the Corvette immediately, just like we set the trigger up to do. Awesome. Now we're on the Corvette. Alternatively, I showed you the cryopods. Let me just show you that real quick. So people can also load into a cryopod here. And now you're in the cryo bay. So that's the regenerative system. Now what I'm telling you about, one of the pros of it is making a progressive mission. What I mean by that is this. So you're in Zeus, you're doing your regenerative respawn mission, right? And you're Zeusing in the mission. And say like, your players go and they capture like an island or something and you want to add a respawn there. You can go into modules real quick. You can go to respawn, players blue floor, and you can add another respawn. You can move it around, and then people will be able to select that from their respawn menu. That's what that means. That's a big pro of the regenerative system, is being able to add respawn points on the fly in real time. You can add multiple ones, however many you like,
Be advised.
So, yeah, that's that. So, going back to the mission editor, so that is our regenerative system. Our mission's not done yet, however. So in the Corvette, I've included a vehicle spawner. This vehicle spawner will allow players without Zeus aid to spawn vehicles right here. And you can select which vehicles you want in this whitelist tab here. These are all the vehicle class names. You can pull those in the game by going to the faction you want them to, or the vehicles. If you want like a UNSC vehicle, so you go to that faction, you hover over it here. The way I do it is I just take the class name by hovering over it here, taking a picture with my phone, so you can see the name of the vehicle right there. Then you see the class name underneath it. Take a picture of that. Take as many pictures as you need, how many vehicles you want, and paste them into the whitelist here. That's the way I do it, at least, or just memorize the name, or you could go into the config file using config viewer. But I haven't found the vehicle class names in here, but you could also use this for faction classes. So if you want to take the class name of a faction, obviously you can go here into the config viewer. You'll start up here, so you'll want to scroll down till you get to the config section. So you see C, and then you see CFG, all this stuff. Scroll down so you find faction classes. Double click on that. Right, double click on it. And then you'll see all the class names of the factions for the mods you have loaded. Say we wanted to only spawn UNSC Army vehicles. So we're going to click on that, copy the class name down here, Control C, and then we would go back to the vehicle spawner, vehicle factions, Control V. But we're not using that. For me, I like to do the vehicles individually. That's just my preference. So yeah, those are done there. So everything else in this vehicle spawner is set up except for the code here at the bottom. So this is the one thing you have to do. So what you need to set that for the Corvette, at least in this template, is you grab the height of this grass cutter here, Vic Pad. Do not move this. Basically, the vehicle spawner references. There's two things that we use to spawn the vehicle. There's the grass cutter, which we use to grab the height of the floor of the Corvette. Oh shit. Yeah, we use to grab the height of the floor of the Corvette. And then there's the marker to tell the vehicle spawner where the position, on the map you want it to spawn. It only uses the marker, but we're using this grass cutter here to grab the height. They both have the same variable name. That's actually bad development practices, but since it's a marker and a world object, they do separate things. They should not interact. So, like I said, we're going to grab the height of the grass cutter, which is the floor height. So we're going to copy that. We're going to paste it, go into the vehicle spawner. We're going to go all the way to the end. Make sure, if you have a different variable name for your grass cutter, that you have this as the same thing as it. Also this. These are the two fields you need to set. It's the same script for our teleport script. We're just going to paste it in at the end. However, there's a problem with this. So the way Arma works, the vehicle is going to spawn in, and it's going to be falling when it spawns in. And since we're executing two scripts at once, basically we're executing the spawn script. It's going to be spawning at a height of 30 initially. That way it doesn't, touch any trees or explode from terrain objects or whatnot. After it spawns in 30 meters above the ground, it's going to then be teleported to the height on the Corvette. So this is the height of the floor. However, it's still falling at this point. So if it's spawned in at the floor's height, or slightly above, it's spawned on the floor and it's still falling, it's just going to explode immediately. So what I like to do, what I've tested and what works, is you add 0.5 to that height. So we're going to round it up to the nearest tenth, and then add 0.5. So 6.6 then becomes 7.1, or whatever your height would be for your map. Just add 0.5 to it. So now this is 3,947.1. Now it's going to spawn slightly above the floor. It's going to give the Arma engine a chance for it to fall down, and it's going to fall down onto the floor, and it's going to be very flush. Doesn't explode, works perfectly. Awesome. Now our mission is complete. Our mission's ready for Corvette Ops on a regenerative respawn system mission. Let's go ahead and test the vehicle spawner first. We always want to test our mission before we release it, because once you release it, once it's on the server, and once you're playing on it more specifically, you cannot fix what you've messed up. So we always test what we do beforehand. We always make sure everything works in the multiplayer editor before our mission's released. So ignore that error. I'll show you how to fix that in a second. So our mission's going to load. We're going to go into our regenerative system and spawn in. Alright, so we're going to go to flinching. It's going to teleport us. Done. Now we're on the ship. We're going to go over to the vehicle spawner. It's kind of funny, you can interact with this from far away if you're looking at it, but yeah, we're going to do that. Now, the way to test this that I've found is the best way is to spawn a Pelican, because the Pelican is the largest vehicle we have in this spawner right now. If you have a larger vehicle, obviously you want to test that, but right now, in this specific spawner, the Pelican's the largest vehicle. So if you can spawn a Pelican, you can spawn anything else. So we're going to spawn a Pelican, and boom. It spawned, it fell down slightly, and now it's ready to go. Didn't take any damage either because it spawned slightly above, not too high, you know, not to take enough damage to be of a concern. So our vehicle spawner works. Awesome. So now we're going to go back, abort, go back into the mission editor. And that's your regenerative system. Now, if you want to use the non-regenerative system, if you want to be a cool cat, like, sorry, not me, that wasn't very cool or Cash Money, but if you want to dive into the non-regenerative system, which I prefer to use, but of course I've been mission making for a while now and know my way around a few things. If it's a bit too complicated for you, don't worry about it. Just stay with the regenerative system. But if you want to use the non-regenerative system, this is how you do it. We're going to go back into our attributes at the top, multiplayer, respawn. We're going to select respawn position, remember, because that's how we set up our non-regenerative. So deselect that, hit OK, everything else is the same. Now we're set to non-regenerative. Go on the map. So now, remember, this respawn position is not going to work. So you can leave that. It's just going to be disabled. You could delete it. I'm going to delete it personally because why not? And now for this specific template, originally, you know, we have this trigger teleporting people to the Corvette. So if you want people to start off on the Corvette, leave their players inside this trigger. If you don't want people to start off on the Corvette, say you want them to be doing something in the field automatically, then you do this. So say you only wanted like special forces on the Corvette, which are these other slots up here, but you wanted all the Marines and the Zeuses to be on the Corvette originally. So we're gonna grab the Zeuses here, move them up here. We're gonna select all the Marines, and say the Marines are in the field, like already fighting. So we're gonna actually grab their player slots, and we're gonna move them to where we want them to be on the map automatically. So say they're like on some island fighting or something, we're going to move them over to that island. So now they're going to, when they spawn into the mission, they're going to be over in that island in like a FOB, or, you know, they're paradropping in a plane or something. And this is the advantage of the non-regenerative, is you can do this, is you can actually have the mission starting off with other people doing stuff beforehand, and when they respawn, they come back to a common place. So Marines right now, they're off doing their own thing, being Marines. If you play in the 105th, you know. Meanwhile, our special forces, so our ODSTs and snipers and Oni boys are on the Corvette along with the Zeuses, Zeusing the mission. They have all the access to all the Corvette's arsenals and things like that. So, yeah. So while this is set up now, we haven't actually set up our respawn point. So for this specific template, we have two grass cutters here, you'll notice. The first one, pad, remember, is the original respawn on the Corvette. That's this one. However, I've also set up another respawn room. So if you go up a floor, you'll come into this room. So this laptop here, this has a real quick add action for spectating. So this will call the a spectator mode. So if people die, they come into this room and then they can spectate the rest of the op. I like to run one life ops. That's why I use the non-regenerative system. It's perfect for that. However, we have another grass cutter here, res. So res is the height of the respawn room. So we're going to copy that, go back to the map, and obviously we don't want to set that to the height of this big trigger because this big trigger is going to pad. Remember, this is the original respawn of the Corvette. So we have another trigger over here which is just a copy of this one, but that is going to be going to res. So you see it's going to res here, and it's going to have the height of that respawn room. So we're going to set that height there, paste that height into that trigger, and almost done. Now we actually need to tell the mission to have people respawn in this trigger so they're teleported to that respawn room. I wish there was a way to have the respawn automatically go there, but unfortunately this is the way you have to do it. So remember, non-regenerative requires a marker, so we're going to place a marker inside this trigger here. We're going to call it respawn west, remember, because we want to be more specific. We want this, so set the alpha down to 0%. We want it to be specifically the side you're respawning. So we're blue 4, respawn west. Boom. So now we have a respawn west marker that's invisible in there. Remember, if you want to grab an invisible marker, go on to the left side here, find it in your list. If you want to move it, set it back to visible, move it where you want it to be, and then obviously you can go back and set it back to invisible. Cool. Now our non-regenerative system setup. So Marines are off doing their own thing. Oni's on the ship. We're going into the scenario. We're the Zeus, so we're loading in the Zeus slot, which means we're a load since we placed our slot inside that trigger. We're going to be on the Corvette initially. So we're going to spawn in the Corvette right now. Let me show you what the respawn system does. Remember, when you're spawning in via this system, you're not going to get a respawn menu, so we're just going to appear in the Corvette like this. No extra loading screens. Well, sorry, spoke too soon. No extra UIs, I should say. My bad. But since we're hosting, it's gonna take a little longer. And bam, we're on the Corvette already, since we're the Zeus. Remember, because we put our Zeus slot down. So, Marines are off doing their own thing. This is the start of the app. You know, maybe they're off in some island doing their own thing, but only Oni, ODSTs, and the Zeus will be on the Corvette at this time. So say we died. Say we got shot right now. Boom. We're dead. And now we hit that trigger, the other one, the smaller one, and we're in the respawn room. Cool. Now we've died. Obviously in our unit, if this was an unfair death, we would go back, do whatever, but now since we're dead, say we were killed in a fair circumstance, now we're going to be able to spectate the rest of the op. So in this template, going into the spectator room and clicking on spectator, this brings you into a spectator. However, you cannot exit it once you enter it. So just keep that in mind, that you cannot exit the spectator once you enter it. That's just put in place so that people can't metagame, spawn in, check out the map, and then respawn again and go back into their character and whatnot. No. So if you go into spectator, you're done for the rest of the mission, unless you abort, or you do it by accident. You'd have to leave the server and rejoin. Cool. So that's the non-regenerative system, and that's with the Corvette template. Now obviously, there's a lot more stuff you could do with this. This is just a general guide on how to set that up for you. That's also, if you're new to Zeusing, this gives you a general overview of how to set up a Zeus mission, at least in the first half of this video. So our mission's not done yet, however. I like to take it a step further and actually, give our mission a title. First off, make things look nice and professional, right? Because that's the way we do things. So we're actually going to go to our desktop. Ignore my desktop there, but so if you haven't configured this already, and if you have, then you know what you're doing. But if you haven't, which most likely you haven't, it's probably going to be in your documents folder. So if you go to your, you open up your file explorer, find your documents folder. You see Arma 3 other profiles. So this is your profile that you use in Arma. And preferably, it's the same one, but if you're complex, hey, power to you. You go into MP missions, and you're going to find the mission that you're doing. So first off, we're going to save this, and I forget what I named this, so I'm just going to name it a new thing. Actually, I don't even know if I saved this or not. So give your mission a file name. Just make sure it's something that you know it is. So we're going to be doing tutorial 2. Okay, because I already have it. I don't know why that's there, but yeah, tutorial 2. I prefer to de-binarize your scenario files because when they're binarized, you can't edit them. And obviously, I just like having the security of knowing, hey, in case my editor doesn't work and I have a really good mission, I can always go in a text editor in C++ and fix whatever's broken, instead of having a binarized scenario file, and it's just extra work. Just de-binarize your files if you would, or your configs at least, initially. Yeah, I just prefer to do that. So we're going to save that. So we're going to go tab out, back to our documents folder. We're going to go to tutorial 2. Now, if you don't know about syntax in mission, in Arma at least, so you're going to see the name of your file, which is tutorial 2, at least in this case, and then dot, and then the reference name of the map you're on. So right now, remember, we were on Vitali 7, so the reference name for that is VT7. It changes per mission, but whenever you're editing your mission name via actually editing the folder, make sure you don't edit the reference name of the map. Make sure you're only editing before the period the name of the mission itself. So we're going to keep that the same though. We're going to go in here, and obviously all we have is a mission SQM because we've only been placing stuff in the editor. But for this specific Corvette template, there's a bit more to it. So in the download link in the description, I'll have all the compositions ready for you. The player composition, the Corvette composition. If you don't have the 105th mod pack and you're just using this as a reference to just make a Zeus template, you'll have to make you won't be able to use these compositions, or they'll be a bit broken because you don't have the assets we have. But the general principles still apply. That being said, if you are on the 105th, great. There's a composition called Spec Ops Settings. So that is going to include all the resources you need to fully flesh out your mission, specifically for a Corvette starting position, or Corvette mission or template, or whatever you want to call it. So we're just going to copy the contents of that, paste it into the root directory of our mission. So included here is some like MRH, like data, whatnot. You don't need to take a look at that. That's just if you want to use it. Honestly, you could delete this if you want. So you could delete these 2 files. That was just some miscellaneous intel. Obviously, you have like tiers. You could delete that if you want to, if you don't use it, if you don't know what it's for. There's also some custom sounds and music. For this tutorial, we're not going to be utilizing those. However, if you want to go in depth into that, I'll probably make another tutorial later on how to do in-depth specific scripting and how to make sounds play in different places in real time and how to Zeus and stuff like that. So for now, we're just going to delete sounds because we're not utilizing them. We're just making a basic template. Along with that, there's a few more files in here. So cd.paa was me making the loading screen of the mission. Now, it doesn't have to be in PAA format. I didn't know that at the time, so I made it PAA format. You can make a PAA format as well. If you don't know how to make a PAA, you use TextView 2 or a similar program. Remember, it is a texture, so it has to be in a square texture format. If you don't know what I'm talking about, just don't worry about it. Just make sure the loading screen is in a JPEG form. So this could be PAA or JPEG. This is the loading screen of the mission. For this, it's just called CD for whatever reason. This is the texture for the commo card in the CIC. So just leave this as is. That if you want to pull the most recent commo card off of the well, actually, this composition is going to be updated continuously. So this will always, if you're always using the up-to-date composition, this will be the current commo card for our elements in the 105th. But if you don't know what that is, don't worry about it. Costs 2, that'll be the Corvette. On the Corvette, the vehicle spawner, it has like a whiteboard above it. Those are the costs of the vehicles that we use during the spec ops that we run and stuff like that. If you don't know what it is, don't worry about it. Just leave it in there. Most importantly, though, we have our description.ext. This is probably the most important file in our mission. So we're going to set our language to C++ so we actually know what's going on. Remember, we deleted all the music and sounds we had, so we're going to just delete all this stuff because this is just configuring those to be playable in the mission. We're just going to delete those because we're not covering those in this tutorial. So our loading screen, remember I told you cd.paa was our loading screen. If you have a custom image you want to use as the loading screen for the mission, just place the image in the default mission path. So right here you would place like load.jpg or whatever your loading screen would be, or you could use cd.paa, up to you, and then you would put load.jpg in loading screen. You would also put that for overview picture. Whatever you put for loading screen and onload mission, make sure you copy and paste it for overview and overview text. That's just for convenience sake. But you don't have, just make sure these two are the same. Author, obviously, that's you making the mission. So let's just change that to your name. So in the 105th, this is my name. Just put yours there. And then you can put so onload mission here. This is your description that shows up when people load the mission. It's also the description for overview text. So if you when people select the mission in the missions in the selector, just set them as the same thing. It does not matter. Well, it does matter. People will see this when they load a mission. So if you have a good head on your shoulders for writing, you can write up a quick little description of your mission or what's going on or whatnot if you're doing a roleplay mission. That's that. So onload names. This is the name of your mission when it's loading that it shows. So set this to whatever you want your mission name to be. So maybe Operation Alpha or something, I don't know. But make sure it's pretty brief, because I think at about 15, 18 characters maybe, it gets cut off. So don't put Operation Alpha, Part 2, Electric Boogaloo, because it'll get cut off. But I'm just going to show you that it does get cut off by putting that. So Operation Alpha Part 2, Electric Boogaloo, it's probably going to only show Operation Alpha Part, and then it's just going to get cut off. So I'll show you what that means. But yeah, just as a joke, we'll keep it as an Electric Boogaloo. So make sure you save that. Make sure you save all the files you edit. So init.sqf here. So we've covered everything here. Init.sqf. This is a fix for a Arma bug that occurs in a lot of Arma missions. So when you load in, there's a random chance that you just get an infinite loading screen. This fixes that. So it manually, deletes the loading screen after 15 seconds if a client's loaded in the mission. That's a random chance, or that's a random bug if you have a lot of mods loaded with your Arma, in your Arma client, basically. So you always want to keep this init.sqf for any mission you load. Also, it's got a little script for MCC, I believe, for missions. But yeah, just keep this whole file in whatever mission you're making. And yeah, if you're getting an infinite loading screen, it can mean a lot of things, but one of those things that it could mean is you got the bug. However, if you put your init.sqf in your mission and you're still getting an infinite loading screen, that means something else is broken, and you got like a wrong file name or something else as well. So don't just automatically assume it's that bug. If you have this init.sqf in, it'll make sure that that bug does not happen. All right. So now our mission is complete. So remember, we changed it to the non-regenerative system, so we're going to go back in and we're going to test it. So now we believe our mission's complete. This is a good template, right? So we're going to load in as Zeus, and we should see our beautiful loading screen appear. Bam! So see, it got cut off because I put too many characters. But yeah, that's cd.paa if you want to take that. That's just a generic snapshot of the Corvette. But yeah, make sure your loading screen name is short. I think that was about 15 characters-ish. 18, give or take. I don't know. I'm not counting them. But yeah, make sure your name is short enough to fit there. Otherwise, it doesn't look very good. And yeah, that's how you create a mission template using both respawn templates that I showed you. That's how you set up the vehicle spawner. So we're going to make sure that this works. It still works. Awesome. So yeah, if you have any questions or concerns, just reach out to us on Discord, or just view this tutorial as many times as you need to get it right. Alright, I'll see you later.